At the moment, there's a case of looking at the industry, where we've been, where we're going to. The first thing I say is that VR is a journey; it's not a destination. So people are looking at what VR is today, and then they're looking at what it can do today. And then in a commercial sense, they're actually being put off slightly because the resolution isn't there. There's some screen door effect. You've got to hit that 90 frames a second to actually avoid people from losing their lunch and having a bad experience. Because the first thing that's going to turn anybody off of using VR is to have a bad experience. We've seen that through history. We've seen that if people don't like it, people don't embrace it, they won't use it. And then, as been said earlier, it's all about content as well. If there's nothing to drive the adoption of it, then people aren't going to use VR there. So it's a piecemeal thing, and everything's catching up with everything else, but it's a journey we're all taking together.
So what strikes me is with all the potential, and I waited in line several months back at a trade show to have an immersive VR experience, and it was like, wow, I had heard about it. It was like so impressive. And yet when you see the photos of people doing it, it seems vaguely creepy. Is that just my opinion? It's like this like dudes with masks on, like going like this, and I'm thinking, is that our future? And is there an enterprise use for that? Lisa, I guess it's an odd question. Is VR creepy?
Oh, VR can be very creepy.
Okay.
And that has to do not just externally with the way it looks. Some of the people playing devil's advocate on my side, when I talk about the spiritual nature of VR and potential, sometimes I get some feedback that equipment is the least spiritual thing that people have seen.
Right.
But internally, you can go a very beautiful direction, and you can go a very scary direction, because that impact on your subconscious is in the hands of the creator, and you can create something that solicits both negative and positive reactions. So especially in the higher end immersive headsets like the Vive and Oculus Rift, motion is connected to emotion. You're really tapping into something very powerful. Yeah.
Amy, what's your sense to that very odd question? Is VR creepy? I mean, I feel you're funny asking. We're supposed to be asking serious questions about the enterprise and adoption, but is VR creepy? Or what is your take on that?
Yes, I mean, it definitely can be creepy. I think, yes, putting on an HMD, which is a head-mounted display in the middle of your day, is a peculiar thing. The form factor is going to change dramatically. AR glasses will sort of seamlessly meld with the VR glasses. In my view of things, you'll have just a sort of a lightweight set of augmented reality glasses, and then you might have some kind of a hood that comes over. So once the form factor changed, it'll be a little easier to wear. In terms of the content, yes, it's exactly what Lisa said. It depends on how it was created and what the purpose was. But something that is interesting that I've noticed when I give demos is when I finally put somebody in a headset and they're immersed in a game or some kind of experience. When they come out of it and I ask them how long they've been in, they always underestimate by half, roughly. So it is very engaging, but you can be engaged in a positive experience as well as a negative experience. So again, I think Oculus has been good about making notations if there are things in a game or an experience that might be negative.
Gary, what's your take? Is there sort of an emotional aspect of VR that seems a little weird and off-putting, or is it? What's your sense of that?
I think it's just to do with social norms. I mean, at the moment, it's just something different. Through the years, we've done different things. We've taken different things. People have started talking to themselves as they're walking down the street, right? Because before cell phones, if somebody was talking to themselves, you'd think that there was an aberration going on. Now it's perfectly normal for somebody to be speaking on a Bluetooth headset, and we take that in our stride.
Sure, smartphones are creepy.
Yeah.
or they can be. Yeah. Okay.
That's a different question. Right. So now we have the VR headsets coming about. And as I say, I agree with Amy there that it's actually going to change in form factor. You're going to be able to see through them eventually. My view is there's going to be something like a slider on the side which sets translucency. So I could have a mixed media experience, so I can see the outside world. I can interact with other people. I don't walk into desks. And I can then set it to full immersion if I want to shut out the outside world, do some serious work, watch a movie, whatever else. So there'll be that progress down the line, and we're already seeing it. You mentioned Magic Leap earlier as like one of those. There's a few other companies out there that are looking at holographic. You've got Microsoft's HoloLens and things like that, which are going a stage towards the AR. So there's a lot of products out there that are looking at taking the next generational leap from where we are today with the headsets. We've also got to consider that the headsets today were designed for a consumer audience. So they were designed with the consumer in mind, to hit a price point, to hit an adoption factor, and for content to be able to support that consumer volume there, so that you get that out. Commercial are probably going to have a different set of care-abouts and design specifications. So as we move forward, you may see a diversification of a consumer headset and then a commercial headset, so that we can address different markets.
Amy, you had talked about that in terms of the commercial market and the consumer market. I guess I've heard so little about the commercial, the enterprise market. Obviously, we know about the consumer market with VR, but I'm really in the dark when it comes to the enterprise market for VR. Is there such a thing, and where would we see it?
It is, and it's actually quite prevalent. The military has been using AR and VR for decades now. Simulation and training, in particular, pilots use different kinds of simulators. So that's got some metrics of success around it. So those are things that are being adopted now in the commercial realm. Healthcare as well, surgical training. So there really are a myriad applications. Again, it's just people aren't accustomed to having these giant headsets on. And so we really have to just let the public get a little more educated. And that's really where I see the confluence of, commercial VR, or rather enterprise VR, kind of, blending with consumer VR, because as social VR, as Facebook's really investing in, as that becomes the norm, again, those barriers are going to come down. I mean, there are people who, generations of people who couldn't even figure out how to use a cell phone. It's like, oh my gosh, I have to explain to my mom how to, how to send a text. And now it's second nature to everyone. And so it's really, again, this next evolution of technology, because it is the next computing platform. And if you think about AR, really just having digital information, now we think of it as digital objects. But in the future, it'll be digital information. So instead of having to look down at your phone, it'll somehow be projected, in your field of view digitally, as this technology evolves.
Lisa, I think she used the phrase AR, and I know the name of your company is Spiritual VR, but are you doing AR as well as VR? What's your take on that?
We do have AR applications. An example of that would be to have a spiritual leader standing in your living room with you and guiding you through a meditation, or taking you through their coursework to teach you about their spirituality or a meditation technique. There's definitely,
is that currently available, or is it still on the horizon?
That's still on the horizon, but
okay.
That's definitely coming. I was going to make one comment about VR in the workplace, though. In addition to those commercial applications, there's a blending too of consumer applications in the workplace. One of the examples I saw here around Upload VR is a gentleman that's working on an empathy app for employees, where the employer gives a performance review to their employee, and it's taped in 360. and then that's taken into VR, and the employer sees what it's like to have received that performance review,
Right.
and gets an empathetic view of what that was like. And he's testing that on a big corporation in Germany with users, and so it does touch the individuals and the users, and help the consumers additionally. But there's a blending too.
Gary, what about the enterprise market? I mean, obviously, since you're working for Dell, I think you'd be much tied into the enterprise market. I mean, do you see applications? What sort of applications are you seeing for enterprise VR?
That's a great question. So we've already touched on the fact that games and entertainment are really driving the VR adoption today. If we look at the numbers in the future that we're basing like business plans on and where we're putting the big bets in, then we're actually seeing a lot of adoption in the commercial space, buildings. We've got architects that are using it to show buildings to customers when they haven't even broken ground. So you can do a walkthrough for a building. You can see day and night cycles. You can see how light reflects off of objects. You can see space for furniture. You don't actually have to build anything or show them that polystyrene model before the customer understands what they're getting. And that reduces the time to monetization. Just to throw out some numbers, then we're looking at studies for by 2025 that 35% of the market is actually going to be in the commercial space. So things like buildings, oil and gas, areas like that. We've got 18% in healthcare. So healthcare is going to really adopt the VR mandate. Education is about 10%, and media and entertainment actually shrinks down to about 11% of the overall VR market by 2025. So we're going to see this huge surge of VR applications in all different verticals, in all different spaces. We've got oil and gas, training up people on oil rigs using VR, and then a mixture of AR and VR. We've got health.
That's happening currently, or that's still coming up?
No, it's happening currently. I mean, there have been training simulations. I can think of a healthcare company that's actually training people on how to change parts of expensive machinery. You consider that you're in a clean room, the machinery is like $10 million, let's say. You don't want to let somebody loose in a clean room and on machinery if they're not used to that environment and not used to that machinery, and then can accidentally cause damage. You can actually give them a feel for the equipment inside of VR so they know what's happening. Oil and gas, you can do like mixed reality, so you can train muscle reflex. So should there be a problem on the oil rig, they know which valve to run to, they know how much force it's going to take to turn that valve, right? And they've actually already done simulations inside of VR to be able to do that. But my personal favorites are in the healthcare space. We're doing a lot of work with some universities, and there's one in particular that's working on VR for treating PTSD. So veterans who have seen active service coming back and suffering from PTSD can actually go through a treatment program utilizing VR in order to alleviate symptoms. And it's things like that which are outside of the games and entertainment that are really capturing the imagination of what people can do in a commercial space, and taking it into areas, quite frankly, which I didn't even consider that when we moved into this, and people have just grasped the nettle and really driving VR forward.
Cool. Amy, what is your sense looking ahead a few years, say by 2020? What is the conversation about VR going to be about then? In other words, where are we going in the next 2 to 3 years with virtual reality?
Well, I think that more to Gary's point, like it shift into more enterprise, and Lisa can probably speak to some of this as well. That even for sort of personal wellness, and not just PTSD, but fear-based issues, issues around social challenges, people on the spectrum, people who have Asperger's, who have challenges in social situations. There's already been promising data to support that, being in a virtual environment just takes that little layer away, so that people who have those challenges are able to practice those social skills. So that's one arena. Again, the form factor changing dramatically to being more of a sunglass type headset, that's going to change dramatically. I was just at an event recently, and I've seen Meta, which is similar to HoloLens, and also ODG has just come out with another augmented reality glasses with their new SDK, which is software development kit. For developers to really build on it. We're so admired in this language here that I forget sometimes. But
it's good to spell out those acronyms. I'm a big fan of that, definitely.
But yeah, so you're just going to see solutions that fit a little bit more into people's everyday lives, and even from the enterprise standpoint, to within healthcare, for individuals to actually look at their own health and wellness and desires, and be able to start to pick and choose content that will help them live out those desires and endeavors.
Mm-hmm. Lisa, what do you think? Looking to the future of the year 2020, like a spiritual experience versus via VR in the year 2020, I want to know what that would be like, or where do you think we're going with VR and spirituality in the next few years?
Sure. Well, with spirituality, so I really believe VR is going to change the future of spirituality in general. Just the way it's democratizing a lot of things in the new media. It offers a place for expression and storytelling and socializing in a new form. And so there are over 4,000 religions in the world, and this is a new place to come and set up ideologies that are new, to explore other cultures and come to understandings, come to greater world peace, I hope. But additionally, outside of spirituality, for the future of the medium, there are new channels for corporate marketing, and because this is the new sort of infancy for the time, for the medium, and people draw back to the time the beginning of the internet. It's similar in that there's a lot of creative storytelling and new communities for socializing with like-minded individuals and all of that. I think there's also going to be these dark nets that are created in communities, like sort of Second Life was offering to people, and news nets and that sort of thing. So
what is a dark net in that context? What is a dark net?
So as opposed to bright, well-lit places where you can sign up for a newsletter and everything's public, these more private communities that you find out from friends of friends and at parties and things like that, where you can go and talk about your your special pleasures and your offhanded desires, or I'm making it sound very crazy. So let's say your love for little Smurf characters. Let me clean this up.
Yes. All right.
It could Smurf characters,
who knows?
or whatever you're into, right? But they don't all have to be dark nets, but they will be hidden nets that make for a very beautiful and colorful world out there. And I think the beginning of this time with VR is a time when that happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Gary, what do you think as we look to the future? You've sort of talked about some things in the future, some of the various applications in healthcare and manufacturing, but what are the obstacles that we need to cross over to get to that area? What is, where are we going, but what's keeping us from getting there?
That comes down to the technology aspect. So, there's the investments that we have to put into there, different ways of doing things. As we've said, the headsets today are aimed at the consumer, at that consumer price point. We're now looking at something where, okay, what can we do to take it to the next level? But you've got things like the resolution today. We need to increase that. People are looking at 2K per eye, 4K per eye, and the ultimate resolution apparently is about 16K per eye for ultra high resolution. Can't distinguish it from reality. Now, in order to drive that at 90 frames a second to avoid that absence of presence, so that you don't feel nausea when you're in the experience, then you've got to have the horsepower behind it to actually then drive those types of resolution. Where we are today with the hardware, then we're not at the point where we can drive those high resolutions at 90 frames a second. We're working towards it. We're working with our partners in the graphics space to actually increase the power there. Obviously, the processors are getting more and more powerful. But then we're also looking at different techniques about how can we limit the amount of power we need, but still come up with the right solution. That's when
it's asynchronous time warp, right? I heard the phrase asynchronous time warp, but I want to be able to. I just want to say that phrase, asynchronous time warp, because it sounds very 2017. I sound very contemporary when I say that. But I think asynchronous time warp is part of what is going to help us move forward, correct? Because it's a way of limiting the frame rate to avoid video stutter.
It is one way, and it's a way of smoothing it out, and we're working out what effect that has on the frame rate. So that's almost like the interpolation. So you get 5 frames being projected twice, takes it to the 90. Then what's the effect in the middle? Because when we've had things before, there's something called the uncanny valley, right, where you look at things and your brain sort of says, "I want to believe it, but I can't quite believe it because I know there's something that's off." Right, you can't put your finger on it. So asynchronous space warp, we're doing testing around that. It's going out into the market. Applications are being written to support it. We'll see what knock-on effect that has. But then there's other techniques like foveated rendering, right, where you can actually look at a point on the screen. If you think about the way that the headset's constructed with the lens and the Fresnel lens, you can't really look to the periphery anyway because of the lens itself. You get the clear picture directly forwards. So if you can then adjust your rendering to only render what you're looking at any given time, you can reduce the power needed because all the rest of it doesn't have to be rendered in high fidelity. To put that into context, if you're talking to a group of people, you're focused on the person's face that you're talking to. The other people are there, but you've got no detail. You can't see the facial expressions, the color of their eyes or whatever else, but they've got presence there. So you recognize where that is. If we can render in those techniques, so we can do an approximate rendering around what we're not focused on, then we can get more power from today's generation cards to generate higher and higher images with better quality and fidelity.
I think we said it. I just would like each of you, if you just want to say one more thing in terms of what is important if people are thinking about VR, AR, one sort of short thought. We know kind of where things are going, but what should somebody be thinking about as they think about VR? What's an important thing for them to be aware of? Amy, what would you point to as one particularly important thing for people to be thinking of?
Well, I think, somehow we need to take the fear of the unknown out of this. It is technology, and I think that does scare people a little bit. So I spend a lot of time. In fact, I'm going to be going to an event tomorrow where I'm going to be demoing. I'm taking a Vive and I'm taking the Gear VR with me to, sort of semi-non-technical people, but people who are investors and are just out there in the world in general to introduce them to what VR is and can be, because I think that's part of the big hurdle. There's a big misconception about what it is and what it can be. And I think all of us in this business, the more we make an effort to share what we know with everyone, the faster there will be adoption. And that's really the goal is to make this, a mainstream technology. Makes sense.
Lisa, what would you say to people if what's a really important thing for them to be aware of in terms of VR and or AR?
Yeah, well, for both, but especially for immersive VR, the important thing to understand about it is that it has an unparalleled ability to influence emotions and behaviors. And so when you're in these games, when you're watching movies, when you're using experience that are outside of games and entertainment, keep in mind that these really can have a dramatic impact in your life, both while you're using them and once you take the headset off. And there's already a great number of apps out there, and there's more coming. So content is coming. Hang in there.
Neat. Gary, what's that one pithy thought that people need to be aware of in terms of virtual reality in 2017 and in the years ahead?
The fact there that, I mean, I started off with it and I'll finish with it, is that VR is the journey. So people don't want to go and like look at VR today, try it, and then shelve it for another 20 years. Yeah, we've had several instances where VR nearly took off. Yeah, nearly took off in the 90s. Yeah, there was a handheld set there. The military, as Amy said, has been using it like for decades. But we're now at this point where the technology has caught up, where it's now generally accessible, and that's the inflection point it needed. Now, with any inflection point, when somebody sees a new shift in society, everybody tries to capitalize on it, and everybody tries to push out content to make, should we say, inverted commas, a quick buck, right? So people need to be aware that there's some really rubbish content out there, as well as some really good content. And it's to actually like focus on the good stuff and to say this is only going to get better as we move forward, and not to judge it by where we are today. And so I think it's open and accessible to everybody. We're looking to democratize it even further as we move forward. You know, we've got plans on that moving forward as well. And I think that as it becomes more and more accessible, you've then got a phone experience. You'll then have a headset experience. Then you're going to have a higher end headset, then commercial. So there's going to be different levels of experiencing it depending on your wallet and application.
I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be cool. I thank the three of you very much. A lot of good thoughts, a lot of expertise. I will send you the link. We can all tweet about it, and we can all watch the future unfold in real time.